Kip, what's up, man? Great to see you. Back for another Ask Me Anything. You look like a completely different person with your face shaved, but here we are nonetheless.
Yeah, it's funny. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I had a scar right there underneath my lip, for
That's
because it's
funny.
been covered up for 15 years. Yeah, it's odd.
Yeah, yeah. I had a little shaving mishap, a little trimming mishap a couple of weeks ago where thought I had the guard that I usually use on, and I had a
Yeah.
shorter one. I went, Zzz. I'm like, oh. And the only thing you can do at that point is just go with the rest of it. So I had this like
Yeah.
super short and the mustache, but it was fine. Fortunately, the mustaches are in style right now, so I didn't look
Yeah.
too creepy or pedophile-ish. So
I feel like we're on a roll, man. Like the Iron Council preview call that we did last week was super fun, highly
yeah,
impactful. Obviously, enrollment into the Iron Council is closed, but do you feel like that's a good resource for us to give out as people consider looking into the Iron Council for next quarter?
the battle plan. What specifically?
The preview call that we did of the
Oh, the
Iron
preview
Council.
call. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a great way for people to check out what it's all about. You spoke, Alan, Lex, and Wayne
Wayne.
spoke.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how fast an hour goes. I wonder if I should make those. I'm torn between making those a little bit longer so we can get more information in, but also I don't want to exhaust people either. They have their lives and other things they have going on. So
Yeah.
yeah, the preview call is available on YouTube. It's also available on our Facebook group as a replay. So yeah, definitely check that out. Or you can go to orderman.com/battle ready to see the backbone of our planning tools that we use inside the Iron Council.
Yeah. And the Battle Ready program is a good thing to do. Like you can't join us, right? Enrollment's closed for this quarter. So you might as well sign up for the Battle Ready program and you can work on your own and then join us, come quarter two.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Cool.
Okay.
Well, let's
Excellent.
get into some questions today.
Sounds good. So we're going to field questions from the Iron Council. To learn more about that, of course, you can go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. Greg Tuui, what are the best ways to combat a man's urge to isolate himself, even if he's got a band of brothers? And this resonates with me because I think this is a little bit of my MO, right? When things start getting tough, I have a tendency to isolate and double down and I don't know, not involve people in my struggle.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common for a lot of guys to do. And I think part of it is that we believe that it's actually the right thing to do because I'm busy. I don't have time for friends. I got to do this. I got to focus on this task or this
Yeah.
project. Or, maybe something's going on in my relationship and I just have to put all my attention and energy and focus on there. And yeah, you can do that, but I don't think you're going to have as much success as you would if you bring in outside interests, outside parties who can help you see things from a way that you just cannot possibly experience yourself. We all look at our circumstances and situations through a very small percentage of what information is actually available. And because we look at it that way, we're missing so much of what could potentially serve us really well. So I think if we first have the mindset that I alone don't have the entire picture. I have one piece of the puzzle, and it's the puzzle that I'm looking at it through. But Kip, you and other people and advisors and friends and coaches and mentors have the other pieces, then I can make a complete picture. So that's the first thing we need to realize. If we understand that first, then we'll be less likely to isolate. I would also suggest that you really ought to evaluate now the type of men that you have in your life. Because if I have a bunch of average, underperforming losers in my life, then naturally I'm not going to turn to those individuals when I'm struggling. But if I have hard chargers, high performers, maximum producers, I'm going to be more likely to turn to those people when I'm really struggling with relationships or business or health or whatever it might be. So evaluate the people that you have in your life. And then also, I don't think that you need to burn yourself out either. Sometimes we think we need to go all in towards isolation or all in towards surrounding ourselves with other people. I think there is something to be said for
Balance.
not isolation, but solitude, where you're actually sitting with your thoughts, you're sitting with who you are, you're evaluating from your own perspective, and you're using that as a component of your overall strategy, which is ultimately to succeed in whatever you're trying to succeed in. So don't conversely go all in on having friends where you can't even think for yourself any longer. But if you can bring these in minimum doses in, and I would also say as another tip, very strategic, scheduled ways. So for you, Kip, I know how big and important jujitsu is in your life. That's a very strategic way for you to be around other men in a certain environment that fosters the kind of growth and development that we're talking about. But that's not really a negotiable, and it's not really a question anymore as to whether or not you go do that. It's scheduled into your calendar. You go every day. You know what's going to take place. So if you don't have any sort of structured, scheduled time with other men, then of course you're less likely to involve other men in your life. So that could be, I've seen obviously jujitsu or other, extracurricular activities. Another one, men's church group. I hear from a lot of guys who are like, yeah, we get together every Saturday morning and we discuss. That's great. Scheduled, structured, solely with other men, where you can talk about your issues through the confines or context of your own value and belief system. Things like that are really powerful, but they have to be structured and they have to be scheduled.
Yeah, that's profound. I have two really good examples in it. And the one I think is interesting, the isolation, when I look back at some of the biggest struggles I have in life, I start running.
Yeah.
Whatever. I start running all the time, and I run without music. And the value of it, of course, there's some physical value, but the biggest value is I'm left with myself and my thoughts as I grind, as I process, as I think through. And that has always been a huge benefit to me whenever I'm stressed out. The other thing is, to your example, and it's a little bit of a different example, is I had a call on Friday with a coach of mine, a mentor of mine. And, and literally the call was pretty much, hey, I need to talk. I'm a little bit on the ledge here. Right. And we talked for roughly 30 minutes. Nothing he said was actually new to me. They're all the things that I already know, but for whatever reason, sometimes when I'm in the jar, it is really hard to see that label. And so I could give, and almost like, oh man, I could give that same advice to someone else. But when it come to me, it's just harder to relate. And sometimes maybe you do have the answers, but just the different perspective or relating it, or a third party saying what you already know somehow connects it in a way that you're in it. And sometimes we're in it so deep that we just can't really see the label.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that you had said made me think of a virtue that all of us, I think, can do a better job incorporating into our lives, and that's humility.
Mm-hmm.
When you say, hey, I'm really struggling with that thing, that requires a sense of humility. And we as men don't often want to admit that we don't have it figured out.
Yeah.
So we
So
put
that
on
might
this,
block us from reaching out to people or whatever.
of course, or it might even block you from going to one of these activities that are structured and scheduled that I talked about, because you don't want to look foolish or be the new guy.
Yeah.
That's your ego and your arrogance speaking, and know that that's hindering and really getting in your way. So I'm glad to see Greg back in the Iron Council. I mean, clearly with his question that he's asking, and the fact that he's back in the Iron Council says that he's back on the path and knows that he needs other men in his life to be able to help direct and navigate his role and his responsibilities.
I love it. All right. Rob Andrews, how do you balance finding a hobby/passion and choosing to pursue it as a career or business idea? What usually separates the two in your mind?
Well, a career or something, something along those lines is you're just making money. That's all that is.
Yeah.
So I know plenty of people who have turned, I turned Order of Man, which is something that was an interest or a little side project of mine, into a very lucrative career, if we're talking about it purely from the business perspective.
Yeah.
So the distinction between hobby and passion versus career is, are you selling anything and turning a profit? If you are, now you have a business.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do you balance it?
Yeah. Balance finding it versus choosing to pursue a career.
Look, there's certain things that I do that I'm not interested in turning into a career, because sometimes turning a passion or a hobby into a career takes the enthusiasm and excitement out of it.
Yeah.
And
It takes
usually
away
what it
some of the
does,
fun. Yeah.
it does. And I wasn't going to use the word fun, but I think that's a good word. I was going to use the word creativity,
Hmm.
because when it's a passion, you can just do it when you want, how you want, why you want. There's no constraint there when it's a passion. But when it's a business and somebody says to you, let's say hypothetically, you're a painter, and somebody says, I want you to paint a painting, they're going to give you constraints. I
Yeah.
want it in these primary colors. I want it to be a picture of this. I want it to look this way. And now all of a sudden you're constrained, and then it becomes a little bit more boring and monotonous. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't turn your passion into a career, but I think that's something you better be aware of. Is this going to confine me so much that this just turns into another job? The other thing that you have to consider when turning a passion into a career is I would highly recommend the book E-Myth, because it stands for entrepreneurial myth. Just because you're good at a thing doesn't mean that you'll be a good business owner. So you might be good at painting, but you may not be great in the business of marketing and selling paintings.
Yeah.
Those are two completely different skill sets. And so when I talk about business, a lot of the times, I think there was a question about making a coaching business later in the questions.
Yeah.
When people ask me about how to start a business, my knee-jerk first immediate response is learn how to market. You already know how to do the thing to the degree that you need to do it. So sure, you can get better, or you can buy technology and improve in your skill set there. But if you don't know how to market, everything else is dead in the water. It doesn't matter how great your product or service you're offering is. If you can't market it, nothing else matters. So I think when you're talking about the balance between passion and business, are you a good marketer? And is that even something that you want to do? Because if you don't want to do it, then you won't be able to grow a business. But you can be passionate about painting or photography or website development or coaching fitness or teaching firearms or an infinite number of things that you could be doing in today's market and landscape. It's actually really nice. It's better than any time it's been in history. So, man, I don't know how to answer the question as to whether you should or should not, but those are some considerations. Do you want to be in the business of whatever it is? Because that's going to take some of the creativity out. And can you be a good marketer? Do you have the aptitude and desire to market your services? Because you'll need to do that if you start a business.
Yeah. I like it. Do you feel like there's ever a passion or, I mean, Rob, I'm not saying this about you, but I'm assuming that sometimes people get into this conversation because they think it's the only way to find fulfillment in your job is by making your hobby or your passion your job. And do you have thoughts around that, and whether you believe that's true or not true, or be careful that we're not always chasing trying to make our passions jobs?
Yeah, I would say the same thing about a relationship. When you enter into a new relationship, it's fun and exciting and there's a lot there. And then you decide to commit yourself to this woman. Some of that is going to change over time.
Yeah.
But does that mean that you're no longer passionate about that? Well, if you're not, that's on you, because there are things that you can do to continue to be passionate about the person that you committed to. And so you ought to incorporate those things, not just for the next year or two while you guys are courting, but for the rest of your lives, if that's the direction that you want to go. And it's the same thing in business. There's elements of my business that I don't enjoy.
Work still, yeah.
So, but it has to get done because it's connected to something. Yes, I am passionate and excited about, but I think even if I weren't, the financial planning business is a great example of that. I wasn't as passionate and excited about financial planning as I am about this, but there was a lot that I really enjoyed about financial planning. And one of the things I enjoyed was learning how to market to people that I'd never met before. And now they're literally turning over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars over to me to manage their portfolios. That was an exciting process. That is an element of marketing. So I learned that I actually really have an aptitude and enjoy marketing services, which translates over into something else. And so, Kip, you and I have talked ad nauseum about making sure that you go all in where you are, not only because it is going to improve your current circumstances, but it's also going to present opportunities that would not exist otherwise. If you're a complete train wreck at work, you're not coming in on time, you're doing the bare minimum to get by, you're missing deadlines, man, a client is never going to come to you and say, hey, I have an opportunity I want to talk with you about. You're never going to put yourself in the position for a promotion. If, however, you show up fully and decide to be passionately engaged in what you're doing, clients who might be in completely unrelated businesses are going to see that and say, hey, you know what? I think I've got a spot open on my team in a managerial position, and I think you'd be really good in that position.
Totally.
Now, that's an opportunity presented to you that you would not have had presented to you in any other way. Or your boss is going to say, hey, you know what, Kip, I've got you in this role here, but man, I've seen you excel with the marketing stuff. And our marketing director is actually leaving the end of the year. And I think we need to have talk with you about what that might look like, because you've done so well here and you have an aptitude, and it seems like you enjoy this, that maybe we can look at making some switches within the organization to get you somewhere where you could do some good.
Yeah. I mean, how often do you see someone that's just a hustler? They're dedicated, they have a strong work ethic, and they're humble and teachable. You could almost put them anywhere, right? Like they don't even have to be good at it. You just know they will be good at it because of how they show up. And
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's crazy to think how often people hinder themselves by not winning where they are.
Right.
It fascinates me. Ryan, would you say that because you obviously, we've talked about this, marketing is one of those areas that you love. It's obviously a passion of you. You're good at it. Did you even know you're good at it though, until you had to do it? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey, actually, I have a talent for this and I'm actually fairly good at it. But it wasn't even on your radar until after you had to figure it out and do it.
I don't even know. So I appreciate the compliment. And I don't even know that I knew I was good at it. And I don't know that you can know you're good at it. All I knew is I enjoyed it.
Hmm. But you
And then I
didn't know
got
you
good at it.
enjoyed it until you got into it.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that just happened just through wanting to grow my business. Frankly, just wanting to make more money in my financial planning practice.
Yeah.
I looked at something. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. And there was, and I did it. And it wasn't perfect, but it developed and grew and it turned into a podcast, which now turned into this. So I didn't know I was good at it. I just knew that I liked it. And I didn't even know I liked it, to your point, until I was like, I got to figure something else out here. And I got the wheels turning and realized that I'm pretty creative. I have a really good ability to tell stories. I have a good ability to take complex ideas and thoughts and messages and turn them into digestible content. So, but that I had to walk the walk. I had to start down that path before I put myself in the position to turn it into a business. And if we're looking at it from a business perspective, I tend to look at every business as a marketing business. Every single business, you can't share with me any other business that's not a marketing agency.
Yeah.
If you're a
Totally.
law firm, you're a marketing agency that happens to market legal services. If you're a podcast, I'm a marketing agency that happens to offer services, products, coaching, consulting stuff for men. If you're selling cars, you're a marketing company that markets vehicles. That's the way you should be looking at it if you're a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, there's just limited growth, right? I never focused enough time on marketing when I worked for myself. I doubled down on quality and referrals. Like that was just literally my business grew strictly just due to the quality of work that I did. But in hindsight, I'm like, man, if I just made investments on the marketing and sales side, how much more effective we could have been. And how much work I left on the table, right? Because of my lack of willingness to go in that direction. So,
well, you know how you know the answer to that is not the answer, but you know that that's true is how many of you guys listening are in a business. Let's say it's law. You're practicing law, and there's a new law firm that comes into town, and they put billboards everywhere, and their website is beautiful, and they're humorous and they're creative, and their marketing is on point. But you know that they're inferior to you with legal planning, like you know it. And you, instead of focusing on the marketing, bitch and gripe and moan about how they don't do as good a job with legal work as you guys do. Again, that might be true and that's all fine and great. But if nobody knows that you're better and they're not,
yeah,
it doesn't matter. And your
totally.
crybaby attitude towards a legal firm that's doing a better job marketing is your fault because you're not doing a good job marketing. And I believe this: if you do, as you believe, have the best legal services in town, then you have a moral responsibility and obligation to make sure that as many people as
know
humanly
about that.
possible know that's the case. And so
Totally.
that's a fault of yours. Don't cry about them not offering good legal services. Cry about yourself not learning to market the way those people do.
Yeah, totally. In our leadership development program, we talked about effective communication just a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that I called out is effective communication is the conduit of your effective leadership. Meaning, if we can't clearly communicate, it doesn't matter if we have great ideas. It doesn't matter that we care about our people. All those things ultimately they're not brought to bear in the service of other individuals if we're ineffective with communicating them.
Yep.
And that's the concept of marketing, right? Is you can be amazing, but if no one knows about you, how amazing are you really?
Yeah, it's the old "does the bear shit in the woods" if nobody or does or not that. I'm sorry,
I
I was
haven't
just
heard
thinking about
that one. I thought it was a
it's
tree that
the
fell, but
tree. Yeah,
whatever.
that's what I was thinking. The tree. Does a tree make a sound, if nobody's around to hear it if it falls?
Uh, if the
I
I'm
like the
trying
bear
to
shit in the
figure out
wood
how
thing.
this works. So did the bear really shit in the woods if you didn't
If
hear
nobody
it?
saw it, if nobody took a picture of it and posted it on Instagram, did the bear really shit in the woods? I think that's how it goes.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. All right. Aaron,
That's funny.
Ian Erickson, what are some actionable strategies to help you stop being resentful or bitter? I'm a young man who has had a lot of tribulation growing up, which has led to a strong distrust of others, a thinking process that is no longer serving me. Your thoughts?
How did the circumstances help you? Like that, I think about that with my own life.
Yeah.
A lot of people will paint their lives, their early lives, as some sort of horrific and tragic upbringing, and not everybody had a horrific upbringing. I didn't. Now, I had some things that I think were less than favorable circumstances, but I don't think I had a horrible childhood. But that said, I didn't really have a permanent father figure around when I was growing up. That's something I would have liked. So I could be resentful and bitter and realize that that's not going to help me. What's done is done. It's being resentful that way doesn't help improve my life. But I can actually look at those circumstances and say, man, look what we've created because of that.
Or look at who you become in spite of it.
Not even in spite of it, because of it.
Because of it. Yeah.
Like it had to happen. I had a mentor of mine years and years ago. He was diagnosed with some sort. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. I can't remember if it was cancer. It was a medical illness. I'm pretty sure it was some form of rare cancer. And as he was fighting this, he really struggled because he was always fit and active and he couldn't do that as much. And the cancer really hurt his body. And then even just treatment was rough and painful and his business suffered for it. It was really a struggle for him. Well, come to find out, this cancer or this illness, again, I can't remember right offhand, so you have to forgive me on that. But whatever it was genetic. And because it was genetic, the likelihood of his children developing this illness were significantly higher because it ran in the family. And he said that as he was going through it and he was learning about this disease, he really threw himself a pity party. Oh, poor me. This is horrible. Why did this happen to me? And he really honed in on the why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
And what he said, and I'll never forget, and I'm paraphrasing, but the message is the same. He said when he started to learn that it was genetic, he knew why it happened to him. It happened to him so that he could help his children navigate it significantly more seamlessly than he could. He took that on, not voluntarily, but he took that on so that he could help his children go through if they have to, or maybe even find ways to not go through it because of their diet and workouts and training and their overall health. But he took the brunt of it. So he began to believe that it didn't happen to him, it happened for him. Same exact set of circumstances, but he chose to look at it as I'm taking this upon myself so that my children don't have to deal with it the way that I did.
Yeah.
And man, that is an incredible, incredible way, not only to look at his situation, but just life. You got laid off. Okay. What vulnerabilities do you have? What exposure do you have, and what can you shore up? A relationship didn't work out. All right, what skills do you need to develop, and how do you need to improve yourself so this doesn't happen again? The more that you can look at things happening for you and conspiring for your benefit as opposed to conspiring against you, the more likely it is that you'll release some of the resentment that you have towards other people and circumstances that you've been through.
Totally. Totally. You know, when we look at resentful, like when we're resentful and we're bitter towards people, I think, Ian, it's important to realize that there's a big difference between what happened versus your interpretation of what happened. And most resentfulness and bitter and anger that we have from our past is because we believe that something happened and it meant that we weren't good enough. It meant that they didn't love us. It meant all these other things. And there's a high probability of your interpretation of it is different than reality. And, you know, if we look at, you know, let's just make up an example here. So if I had a father that was, you know, highly abusive when I was a kid, and this is going to get, well, I don't know, maybe I don't need to preface this. If I had a father that was abusive as a child, I have an option as an adult to say, am I going to take that past and carry it on into my present state and into the future? And most people will, because they are still blaming that father for the way their life turned out. And that is a benefit because why? Well, because if my life is a piece of shit, it's not my fault. And it's because of this. And so in essence, it's a lack of taking ownership for your current state and how life is. It's literally a form of victimhood. And I get it that you may have been a victim at one point in your life, but you're perpetuating a victimhood mindset by bringing it into your present state. And there is power in empathy. There's power in understanding that there's probably a big difference between your interpretation of what happened versus what actually happened. And I would suggest that in this example, my abusive father actually probably loved me and probably cared about me and probably was doing the best job that he could do with his circumstances based upon how he was raised. And one statement I like to hold on to is, if I were Ryan and I was raised the way that Ryan was raised, I would do the same things Ryan would do. And so who are we to place judgment of what should or should not be when we lack empathy of understanding them as a person and probably what they went through? And then here's the crazy part, but there's power in this, is you restore your integrity. And you might be like, whoa, what are you talking about? I didn't do nothing wrong. Well, maybe, or perhaps you have withheld love, affection, and other things from that individual your entire life. And maybe you need to go back to the table in this example I've made up. Go back to dad and say, you know what, dad, I'm sorry. I'm going to own my part of this. I'm going to take extreme ownership and own my part. And the part I'm going to own is how I've reacted, how I've withheld love and affection towards you. Because when this happened when we were younger, I interpreted it as that you didn't care about me. And that may not even be true. And I've shown up in a disempowered way towards us. I've hindered our relationship. I've stonewalled you because of that meaning. In reality, I don't even know if that's true or not. And I'm sorry for that. So you find the area where you can take ownership, and you take ownership. That is the only way that we empower, and it's the only way we grow. You can't grow from the experience and become a better man if you don't take ownership of how you're reacting to it. But as long as you keep pushing the blame back on what happened to you as a kid or whatever, you won't grow. You will continue to be a victim of that circumstance, and you'll project that in all the relationships that you have.
Well said. I've got nothing. It's
It's
powerful.
tough. It's tough. Okay. Joseph,
You're
what did
not
we
used to
go
me
with?
not saying anything else. Anything
I know. I'm
else.
like weirded out. Like,
No, what
just add
what
something
else?
really quick.
No, I don't need to add anything else, man. You did a good, like,
Okay.
you said it. You said what needed to be said.
What did we decide? Joseph, my apologies, man. I should know how to pronounce your last name. So I'm just going to say that. So Joseph
We
Keaton,
said Keating is, I think, has as
Keating.
what you and I decided, but maybe
Yeah.
we're way off. We should
So
know that.
Joe, reach out to us, correct us so we can fix that. His question, will there be another session of Order Man on the Warrior Poet Society Network?
John and I talked
Or
last
another
week.
season, I said.
Another
I
season,
meant.
yeah.
Yeah.
John and I talked last week about that. Well, talked last week, not specifically about that, but we have talked a little bit about that. The answer is I don't know. He doesn't know. We're still trying to figure out how that makes sense. What's the best way to do that? So I can't give you a clear answer, but guys, I still am a huge fan of obviously Warrior Poet Society and their network they have, which is basically Netflix for men. From I've got I think 3 seasons on there of our show, exclusive stuff. So things that I haven't done over here. They've got training videos and culture commentary. It's actually really, really powerful. So that's the Warrior Poet Society Network. I would highly suggest you check that out.
Awesome. All right. Anton Theodore. Hello, sir. What would be an example of something that young men should do and implement to get initiated into becoming a man? Or what should a father do or implement into his son to initiate him into manhood?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can do, but ultimately, I think we need to strip it down to what are the factors that should be included in something like this. So it has to be challenging. There has to be a level of risk. I'm not talking about death necessarily, but there does have to be a level of risk. There has to be some sort of ceremony or ritual to it that this is a ritualized process, even if it's just you doing it for the first time. It still has to be a ritualized process, and there has to be some sort of acknowledgement from other men or men of the tribe. So I would say those 4 things need to be included. And if you look at anything, whether it's somebody going to war, it's challenging. There's a level of risk. What was the third thing I said?
Like the men or recognition of the men.
Oh yeah, ritualized, right?
Yeah,
Ritualized.
ritualized, and then that.
Yeah, so ritualized. So obviously there's a plan for training, basic training or boot camp, where you actually go through a process, and then at the end, it's acknowledged by the other men,
that
your
you're
peers.
ready.
Your peers are acknowledged because they went through it as well, and your supervisors, your superiors, they are acknowledging that as well. They're literally pinning you with something, acknowledging you as a member of us now. So that's it. Those factors need to be included. And so I've done things like there's a really cool hike here. When my kids turn 8, we go on this hike, and we hike, and they all know that. So there's the ritualized process of it. Yeah. It's challenging. It's not an easy thing to do for an 8-year-old to do. There's an element of risk because we go up there and we spend the night, and it's cold and uncomfortable, and maybe we'll get hurt or be tired. I mean, it's not risk of death, but there's still some risk there. There's certain conversations that we have and certain items that I give to them where they know. And at the end, they earn their first rifle. So it's me acknowledging that you've gone through this, you've completed this, and you're ready for the next evolution. Yeah.
And maybe ideas like what stages do you do for that? Because obviously you've talked about a stage at age 8.
Yeah.
What ages are you executing kind of a ritual of some sort?
I mean, I would say do that every 1 to 2 years. You can do that as a yearly thing, or you can do it every couple of years. But every year there should be something. My youngest son, who's 7, he's talking about wanting to go hunting. He's like that because he sees me going hunting with his older brothers, and he wants to go. My daughter is also going. We're planning a hunt for later in the year with her. So they see me going through that with their older brothers, and they want to go through that process. So again, there's that ritualized component of it. It's challenging. And then there's a ceremony, meaning you actually killed your first animal. Like that's part of the process of growing and developing. So I would say at least yearly, you ought to incorporate some sort of experience that has those factors, and it gets progressively challenging, which is going to be good for you too, because you got to stay on your game. But it'll get progressively challenging as you go. It could be a Spartan race. It could be a hike and a camp out like I talked about. It could be a hunt. Any number of things it could be based on where you are and what you like and what you're proficient with. Just make sure it includes those 4 factors.
Yeah, I like that. We, Asia and I, we did our 2024 planning over the weekend. And one of the things that we did is we talked about each kid and kind of the four quadrants of, how are they doing in these four areas and what can we do to, be better parents to help them spiritually or physically, and what
Mm-hmm.
things we have in place. And one thing that we had on our docket was the challenge for us this year, right? What's the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm pretty confident. I think she signed up for her first half Ironman, and
Awesome.
that's what she's taken on this year, right? Um, I'm taking away from this conversation of, we didn't do that for our kids though. And I like that. And so I think I'm going to bring that back to the drawing table this week of, all right, Kika, what's the challenge? Right? Are we going to do a 5K tough mudder? Are you going to run Zion's relay with us? Right? Like, what's the thing this year? What's the big, hairy challenge that's going to push them and is going to be something that they can work towards and build some confidence and feel great about. So
Yeah,
I
I
like
like
I
it.
like this question because that's going to help us kind of think through what we can do for our kids better.
Yeah, and it's good for us too, right? It serves us as well.
Totally, because I have to do a stupid 5K, tough
Yep,
mudder or whatever, and I'm being pulled into half Ironman training
of
all of a sudden.
course. I know that.
I'm like,
Yeah, I know
but
that. That's good. No, it's a
yeah.
good thing. It's good
Oh,
whenever it's like the adage, a bear shits in the woods. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
It's
I
the
was
it's
gonna say
it's
there's no correlation.
it's the adage of rising tide lifts all ships. There you
All
go.
right, Jerry Siddell, what is the best way to grow a coaching business? So many people do not want the accountability, discipline, and structure, having challenges getting clients.
Yeah, look, if you're I'm going to be a little firm on this one. If you're already saying nobody wants coaching accountability, like you're never going to find anybody because you already decided that too many people don't want coaching and accountability. So now it's just self-fulfilling prophecy. You just have to find a bunch of people to prove you right. That's
Yeah.
easy. There's plenty of people. There's plenty. They're everywhere. We've got what we've got tens of thousands of people who have gone through the Iron Council. They're everywhere. And you
Yeah.
don't need everyone. You just need 100 for now, 200, 500, 1,000, whatever. But you don't need everyone. So get that out of your mind. That's a toxic thought. And frankly, it's just not true.
Yeah.
I think most people do want coaching and accountability, but what you're going to have to figure out is where their time is, how they're going to be able to afford it, how they're going to balance doing this extra thing with what they already have going on, how to make sure you articulate and communicate that their investment is going to be returned tenfold or plus to them. So those are the real answers. Like, let's not just stop. They don't want it. No, they do want it. They just have some objections to it, which are valid. If I'm looking for coaching, I have to figure out where in my schedule that's going to go. That's a valid concern. That's
Totally.
not an excuse. That's a reason. And that's something that I, as a coach or providing the services, need to identify, anticipate, and address head on. And then once you learn what those problems are for people, maybe they've done this in the past and they've had a horrible experience because whoever they hired didn't do a good job. Okay, I need to know that as the one providing the services because now I know what I need to market. So the more problems that we can identify, not that they don't want it, but what's keeping them from having it. Because if I said to you, hey, do you want to make $1 million this year? You would say, of course, absolutely. I want to make $1 million this year. Okay. Well, you need to do this, 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 and this. Well, I mean, I'm busy with work and like my kids, and I'm coaching my kids' soccer team, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Okay. So you want it, but there's hurdles to having it. Right. Okay. Let me help you overcome these hurdles. If I could show you how to do that, would you work with me to make $1 million this year? That's marketing. But you
Yeah.
got to figure out what the pain points are.
Totally. Well, and let's innovate, right? Maybe he's right. Right? People don't want accountability, discipline, and structure. Awesome. So how do you clarify? How do you bridge? How do you innovate in a way that discipline is not an issue? How do you communicate in a way that accountability sounds awesome? Right? Like then address the problem. And then that makes you so much better as a coach, because every other coach is going, well, these are the things you're going to struggle with. It's like the analogy of change. I can't stand it. It drives me mad. Oh, everyone hates change. You know how it is. Change is difficult. So, it's just the way it is. And I'm like, BS. That's not true. Hey, Ryan, you want $1,000,000? It's change. I don't know if you want it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're going to go like, yeah, I want it. Why? Because the desire is there. So now what do? I want to handle change. I have to focus on desire. What am I doing benefits the individual? And if that's clear and they can see the value and I communicate and articulate in a way, then they're on board. Okay, I guess change isn't a problem then. What's the problem is us clarifying the benefit to individuals so they have willingness to pivot and adjust. People are willing to pivot and adjust. The question is whether they're confident in the actions. Okay, well then now how do I build up the confidence, right? How do I articulate my message and my coaching in a way that they don't question whether it's going to work or not, right? Like back to what you said earlier, man, there's power in finding a way and innovating when we're committed to the idea. But the minute we go, well, people don't, you're not serving yourself even,
Right.
in that example. So,
Yep. Exactly. Cool.
cool,
What
man.
else?
Bob Ross, I often feel guilty if I'm not 100% engaged with my son all the time when we are at home. Examples, if I have plans to do home project, I have no issue with this. But if there's a downtime at the house, I feel I must be engaged since he is our only child, 7 years old. My wife is concerned that he is not learning to entertain himself. That's actually a good point. I want to be balanced, being the best father I can be, with making sure I give him the tools and skills he needs to flourish. I feel guilty if I'm not engaged, even if we have been together doing things all day. I believe my wife is correct, but I don't know where to draw the line. Thoughts and ideas would be appreciated.
Yeah. I thought that was a good point, like learning to
Yeah.
entertain himself. So I think we can do that at 7 years old by fostering certain things that he enjoys. So my daughter, for example, really loves to draw. So we communicate about it. And if I have something I need to do and get taken care of, because I'm engaged, I will talk with her. Hey, hon, we've been doing this all day. I have a couple of phone calls I need to make, or I'm going to go to the gym for an hour, or I'm going to do fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And why don't you find something to do? And then that way, this evening, we can come back and we can do something else together. So now you're communicating what you're doing, and you can also articulate how important it is that you go to the gym so you can stay healthy, so that we're here and present and available and not tired all the time. Right. So you talk to her about that. In the meantime, my daughter really enjoys drawing. So I can share with her a couple of things that she might be able to do. Maybe it's go play outside, call a friend and have her come over or go over there, draw, giving her ideas and just letting her struggle through that a little bit. I think that's a really good point. Our job is just to foster some of that growth and creativity by providing opportunities to them. Another thing that you can do is you can also, maybe you're already doing this, include them in what you're doing. If you have a project around the house that needs to be accomplished, your son is 7, he can help you. And yes, it's going to slow the process down. It's not going to be as convenient. It's going to be frustrating at times. But if you're feeling guilty about not doing things together or not being engaged, here's a great way for you to get things done and also include your children. My oldest, he's 15. He'll soon be 16. Him and I go to the gym 3 days a week. So I still go get my time in the gym. He gets his time in the gym. We don't really talk all that much. In fact, he does a different workout typically than I do, but we have the drive there. We have the workout time. We'll pass, or I'll spot him or he'll spot me. And then we have the drive home. That's just a good little, I'm going to spend the time there anyways. What a great way to involve him for something healthy. He sees me working hard. He sees the results I'm producing. And it's a great way to get what I need done and include him in the process. So when you have a child who's 7 getting older, that's a nice thing because you can start including them in a lot more.
Yeah. And I think there's, to your example, some of the examples, like, whether it's reading time, it's like, okay, we're going to take a 30-minute break. I'm reading, you're reading. They're kind of doing it by themselves, but they're doing it with you, if that makes sense. Or, one thing I've done is like, hey, let's clean our rooms. Let's race. Dad's going to pick up my room. You go pick up your room. And then after we're done with our rooms, then we'll come back together. Right. And so it's a little bit of we're doing it together, but we're really not, and allows them to kind of, run solo for a bit. And I'm not hovering over them, making sure they're doing everything perfectly, you know what I mean? And that they're able to entertain and have a little bit of discipline in themselves, but we're kind of doing it as a partnership at the same time. I think there's a lot of little elements of that we could do that. So,
Yeah. And
okay.
the last thing I wrote here too, Kip, is just boundaries and commitment. Like you want to make sure that if you're reading example, don't let your kids interfere with that. If you're reading and it's reading time and everybody knows it's reading time and they say, "Hey dad, can you get me some milk?" No. Reading time right now. Well, I'm thirsty. Well, in a half an hour I can get you some milk. Your kid's not going to, die of thirst because they don't get a drink for a half hour. And they'll know that the boundary is real. They're going to test and push on it all the time. And the more that you waffle, the more they know they can manipulate you. And then they start to learn the tactics they need to do in order to manipulate you to get what they want.
Totally.
So establish the boundary, communicate the boundary, uphold the boundary. And then the last thing I wrote is make sure that you honor your commitment. And I haven't always been great at this, but if I say, "Hey, look, no, I can't go ride bikes with you right now because I'm going to go to the gym for an hour, but I'll do that when I get home." You have to do it when you get home because you said you would. So if you want people to honor your boundaries, then you have to honor your commitments.
Yeah.
And they'll see. And the more you do that, they'll begin to see, oh yeah, dad does go to the gym at this time. So you have to be consistent about it. And I know that's the case. But when he gets home, he always rides bikes with me because they know you've set the standard, you've set the precedent. Right now, you may not be setting a precedent, so they don't have anything to run on or information to interpret. Give them good information and follow through on your commitments.
Totally. I can't help but add this, even though this is not part of Bob's question, but the opportunity to create delayed gratification, super, super important. And I think those boundaries help that, right? Oh, I want this. You're going to have to wait.
Yeah.
Right. We got 30 minutes. You're going to have to wait.
Yeah.
We live in a dopamine world, and kids are getting instant gratification every direction. Any opportunity to teach them to grind a little, not to be excited right now, and I'm going to have to wait for a reward over a period of time, the more we can teach our kids to do that, the better. Because in my opinion, that will be the determining factor on whether they're successful in life, is their ability to delay gratification. So look for those opportunities to do that as much as humanly possible. And to his wife's comment, us constantly engaging with our kids all the time is a form of constant gratification because we're entertaining them the whole time. They need that alone time. They need that time to kind of push through and do some difficult things and get reward later. So as spot on by mom. Keep her, Bob.
Agreed. Keep her. All right, brother. Well, why don't you finish this off today?
Yeah. So the key thing is enrollment for the Iron Council is closed. But you can join us for our Battle Ready program in the meantime until enrollment opens in Q2. That's orderofman.com/battle ready. And of course, you can connect with Mr. Mickler on Twitter, X, and Instagram at Ryan Mickler. And then get your swag, as always, at store.orderofman.com.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Great questions today. And as always, I hope we gave you something to think about and consider. We will be back on Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.